have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
And you might have seen in the news this week, the Trump Justice Department has asked the Supreme Court of the United States that we should all be allowed to discriminate against transgender people.
I think the real headline is, has he lost it completely or not? The debate is open. But meanwhile, the Log Cabin Republican Club has endorsed Trump for re-election and thus becomes even tinier than it was.
It's a man bites dog story.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Can a T-shirt company refuse to print a Pride T-shirt on religious grounds? The Kentucky Supreme Court is going to decide that question.
The United Methodist Church is not going to be united anymore. They have released a plan for divorcing themselves over LGBT issues.
Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul, was revealed to have...
Some people call him Ringo George.
was revealed to have ignored sexual abuse of children by Archbishop Ted McCarrick, an American, more than 30 years ago when it was brought to his attention.
Well, of course.
Well, of course.
Is that news? Is that a headline?
I'll tell you what it's going, well, when we discuss the case, what it's going to bring out in terms of the Vatican being, subpoenaed over all this.
I think everything up to this moment and undoubtedly beyond is about ignoring charges of abuse. But the mayor of Ottawa, Canada, has come out at age 58.
Better late than never, he said.
Always.
And actress Faye Dunaway is being sued for anti-gay discrimination.
It's a sordid story. Oh. We'll give you the details.
Mommy dearest.
But we're going to start with...
Well, I'd like to start with, Trump's retreat on gun control this week. He said, they call it a slippery slope. And I'm not going to let that happen. And we're not going to let the slippery slope to fascism go down either, Mr. President.
Well, you're awfully optimistic.
I'm not optimistic. We're on it already, and we gotta fight harder. All right, Justice Department.
I'm just not as confident that we will succeed.
I'm not confident of anything.
Given the demographic composition of this country, too many Trump supporters.
Changing.
Yes, well, I only mean it as Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters.
Okay.
But let's launch into the news around him.
So the Justice Department, they filed their briefs to the Supreme Court in the case that's going to, one case that's going to be heard on October 8th among 3 LGBT cases, urging the court to allow employers to turn away or fire transgender workers based solely on their gender identity. They say that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 only protects on the basis of biological sex, which is not the precedent in the courts these days.
Well, in fact, we've had much more success in the courts in the case of transgender employees on these arguments than we have on sexual orientation.
Yes.
Because so clearly, when you're talking about a trans employee who's fired for being trans, it is because they have, in their terms, changed their sex. And therefore, to make the argument that this is sex discrimination is a lot easier than to make a sexual orientation charge stand in an argument about sex discrimination. So the fact that the Trump administration is landing on this first seems unlikely, but they're going to go after all of us all the way.
This is the case of a woman named Amy Stevens, transgender woman, versus Harris Funeral Home, where she worked in Michigan, and then they fired her after she transitioned. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit held for her, and Chase Strangio represented her at the ACLU and said the case affects anyone who departs from sex stereotypes.
Well, that's
because they want, if you want to wear pants if you're a woman,
but that
this
is
would
what
affect
these cases have historically been about, is sex stereotyping. And of course, that is exactly what these employers are doing, is sex stereotyping, and therefore we have won the cases. But now it's
even Justice Scalia ruled against sex stereotyping.
Yes, he did. But now we have the current court. And the current court has shown no signs of coming down on our side on this. So it's not impossible, but I wouldn't necessarily bet the House in our favor on these cases.
There was some progress in the Trump administration filing. Instead of calling Amy he, they avoided pronouns entirely in their briefs.
God.
The ADF lawyer said it was done out of respect to Stevens. Whoa, wait a minute.
They have nothing against us, nothing at all. They just don't want us to work. They don't want us to have children. They don't want us to have housing, whatever.
That's not being very nice.
Because, of course, at the same time, the Department of Labor has proposed a new rule that would expand the right of federal contractors to claim a religious right to not hire LGBT people.
Or single parents, or members of other religions.
Anything that they claim their religion is against.
There's a 30-day comment period on this one. Well over 100,000 people wrote in on the last one, which was they were attacking the ACA and changing the rules on that.
It's just a daily attack.
Nancy Pelosi called this Department of Labor filing cruel, blatantly bigoted, and downright dangerous. We're not mincing words.
Now, as Andy said, there are 3 cases coming to the Supreme Court being argued in September or October?
October to the 8th.
October, of course, because the term starts the first Monday in October.
Right.
So 3 cases that will be in front of the Supreme Court. One is this Amy Stevens case of
transgender.
Yes, discrimination against a transgender employee. The other 2 are about sexual orientation and discrimination against the skydiver who died.
Yep.
But he was fired for being gay, and I can't remember.
He came out to reassure a woman he was doing a tandem jump with and said, "Don't worry, I'm gay. If you're worried about me being attached to you."
And his employer said that was inappropriate and fired him. And I can't remember what the third case is, but it's another sexual orientation case. Maybe the Georgia case. I don't want to say when I'm just trying to pull it out of my head.
I was waiting on that because the Trump administration hasn't technically weighed in. I want to throw in here, as we're talking about all these transgender people and all this push for discrimination, the murder of a black trans woman in Houston. Let's put her picture up there. Tracy Single, found dead on July the 30th, a homicide. It took the Houston police until August 15th just to identify her. The Grand Marshal of the Pride March down there, Dee Waters, had organized a town meeting on August 11th. Help us find Tracy Single, and it's a heartbreaking story. She had only moved to Houston on June 17th. She's from New Orleans. She'd just settled into her new home and just hacked to death.
They did a nice thing for her in Houston. They did a lighting up of City Hall in her memory and lit up some bridges too. So they're taking note of this, but no one's been arrested.
And to repeat, what would be even better is lots of employment opportunities, lots of educational opportunities, et cetera, for transgender people. So they're not living so far on the edge. I don't know the exact circumstances of this death. She was killed at a gas station, but who knows?
Well, one of the more chilling stories to come out that encompasses all of this is Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel, one of these right-wing groups, giving an interview and saying that, yes, President Trump has accomplished 90% of their right-wing goals, from expanding religious freedom to issuing pro-life declarations to appointing all these judges and doing all his anti-LGBT stuff. 90%.
Yes. They are happy. They are getting everything that they want.
They say more evangelicals will vote for him in 2020 than voted for him in 2016.
Possibly. But there's a whole segment that's being turned off, including some women who have been turned off, were supporters.
Sure.
No, who did vote for him before.
I understand, but and I'm sure our audience understands.
And of course, you've heard about the Log Cabin Club. This is a club that barely exists of gay LG. Well, I think it's just mostly gay male Republicans. A couple of women. One of them is one of their executives. This is a group that is basically opposed to transgender rights and excuses Trump's assaults on LGBT rights, but they endorsed him. Now remember, just 14% of self-identified LGBT people voted for Trump in 2016. I mean, Romney got 22% and McCain got 27%. But Trump is honored to have their endorsement. He called it an award. Who was the gay reporter who was there?
Chris Johnson.
Chris Johnson was there doing the poll reporting and got to ask Trump about this, and Trump said he's always very, very proud to have their endorsement.
Well, Chris Johnson tried to ask him about this in light of all these horrible things he's doing, and Trump, of course, just ignored the substance of the question and talked about how honored he was to have the endorsement.
So the Log Cabin, quote-unquote, leaders did an op-ed in the Washington Post, but they're basically saying that they're grateful for crumbs, like a gay man speaking at the convention, Peter Thiel, and a false promise that Trump made to end AIDS in 10 years. Oh, he said he would end AIDS in 10 years. He has said a lot of things.
Well, he said that, and then he fired the entire presidential AIDS commission.
And cut the budget.
Yeah.
And Richard Grenell's, campaign to end anti-sodomy laws around the world was cited. This is our ambassador, gay ambassador to Germany. Well, I mean, and yet we totally suck up to the countries that kill gay people just for engaging in love, like Saudi Arabia. And of course, Trump is in court now working against LGBT rights.
The Log Cabin people also were happy about the tax cuts. They must all run corporations if they're happy about the tax cuts.
My most telling experience with Log Cabin Republicans was at the Republican National Convention. They had a big party at Bryant Park. Were you there? And
I was on the outskirts demonstrating, I think.
Well, I was covering it. So Bloomberg hosted it, and because he was a Republican, they hosted the Log Cabin people, and Giuliani.
This was one of the Bush years.
Yes, 2000, I think.
Okay.
So Giuliani was the featured speaker, and Giuliani, citing some gay things that he did, which he did do. Tepid. Very
and
tepid.
I
threw all these people off welfare. They went crazy for that. They love that. That's what they love. But not all of them are heartless. Jennifer Horn of New Hampshire, a former chair of the Republican State Committee, resigned from the Log Cabin Club. She said she couldn't possibly explain support for Trump to her children. And don't forget, they didn't support Trump in 2016, this club.
Right, they withheld their endorsement, but now they're very enthusiastic because he's done so much for the community.
She said, our party is dying because of the silence of those who oppose this president. I mean, so obviously they talk to lots of Republicans who think, oh my God, yeah, he's terrible, but they won't speak up. And Robert Turner, the former head of the D.C. chapter, also resigned, citing Trump's anti-LGBT rollbacks and rule changes.
The club in endorsing did admit that they thought banning trans people from serving in the military was a bad thing, but nonetheless they were endorsing him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is the time to keep reminding you that, because I think the only thing that seems to bring people down in this country is association with people who engage in underage sex. Trump pal Jeffrey Epstein, who Trump is glad to be rid of, had a painting of Bill Clinton in a blue dress, and red high heels in his New York mansion as you came into the place.
Yes.
He actually bought this painting, which was by an NYU art student, I think, named Patrina Ryan Clyde. It's called Parsing Bill. It's very, very, it gets stranger and stranger.
Extremely strange.
It does. All right. Other Trump stuff. Well, how about the Trump donors?
How about them?
We told you, the head of Marvel Comics and Movies, Ike Perlmutter, censored this week he didn't do it, but his company did. They censored Art Spiegelman, the cartoonist who did Mouse about the mice and the Holocaust. because he wrote an intro to Marvel: The Golden Age and mentioned how did he phrase it? The orange skull that haunts America. But he was writing about the golden age of Marvel, which was 1939 to 49, where all these Jewish cartoonists were doing Captain America, these muscular Americans. And Spiegelman, said most of them were Jews. They're all about fighting fascism. Well, now they're into fascism. And the designer, major designer, Rag and Bone, has pulled out of Fashion Week at Steve Ross's, the big Trump donor's, Hudson Yards, which is up the block from us. And Equinox and Soul Cycle?
Yes.
Yeah, they're owned by Steve Ross. They're trying to dig themselves out of this by donating $1 million to LGBT charities. But to vote on which charity should get it, you have to be a member and you have to show up to their clubs. So forget about it. People are withdrawing because they don't want Steve Ross's bank account further padded.
Well, there is news on an almost daily basis about who his donors are, and they do control a lot of America, and it's going to get very narrow, the number of companies we can patronize without running into that.
'Twas ever so.
Yeah.
And, in reading about Trump's retreat on gun control, I learned this week, I didn't know this, that the Second Amendment was added to appease slaveholders such as Patrick Henry, the governor of Virginia, who threatened not to adopt the Constitution because he was worried about Congress having the power to control militias. He wanted the states to be able to do it so that they could keep slave rebellions down and round up runaway slaves. So that's where it came from.
And parenthetically, congratulations to the New York Times for the major project they're doing on the history of slavery in the United States, starting in 1619, and
this week.
Yes, and talking about how much farther back and how deeper it goes than any of us have given any thought to, any of us white people anyway. And it's an eye-opener, and it's the 1619 Project. A couple of our well-known black lesbian writers, Linda Villarosa and Jackie Woodson, have major pieces in the Sunday Times Magazine on this. But it's really stunning and important, and I'm happy to see that there is a huge hunger for this information, and the Times is being inundated with requests for material.
It is timely because it is what we are living through.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how even though the officer who killed Eric Garner, was finally disciplined, he lost his job, by the New York City Police Department. They were practically apologetic about it. Interesting.
Yes, and criticized Garner for resisting arrest when all he was really doing is saying, don't touch me.
Right.
He wasn't saying, I'm not going with you, or don't give me a ticket, or whatever.
Saying, give me a break.
Yeah, just, don't assault me. But this whole project is a rebalancing of the power dynamic, and it's quite fascinating and moving and important to read. So,
and predictably, the husband of our ambassador to the Vatican, Newt Gingrich, said it's all out of context.
The whole point is it establishes context.
Of course. It is the context for what this country is. I mean, look, that's why I keep saying our Constitution.
Why does anybody listen to any of us anymore?
Our Constitution was written in so many ways to protect slavery. We did have the post-Civil War amendments, which were great, and we've been able to use them. But that is what it is grounded in. That is what the Electoral College is grounded in. That is what the Senate is grounded in.
It's not just the Constitution. It's all the violence and physical control exerted on
people of color.
Yes.
Yes.
For 4 centuries.
And control of women. The Planned Parenthood, said that they're not going to comply with the gag rule. Good for them. State and local governments in more liberal states are making up the $60 million that they are foregoing.
And other
Title X funding.
Other agencies and state agencies are opting out of the federal money too, so that they also are not subject to this gag rule, this extreme gag rule.
The gag rule, which says you can't tell women where to go for an abortion.
You can't even discuss it with them.
Right. And it was nice to see two of the Proud Boys convicted for their assaults on Antifa, which Trump is in the process of making into a terrorist group. But it was the Proud Boys who were convicted after leaving a Republican club forum in Manhattan. And Trump wants to, these guys who were convicted face up to 15 years, and they're being sentenced on October 11th.
I want to hear about the Methodists.
Sure. The Methodist Church has drafted and released this thing called the Indianapolis Plan because they're going to have to split up over LGBT rights. These are irreconcilable differences. Because
they decided this year to reinforce their prohibitions against performing same-sex marriages, having clergy,
exactly.
LGBT clergy.
That is exactly the split.
People were very, very upset, and so this split is coming to fruition.
So they say they want to maintain neighborliness with the two wings. They're going to establish two separate wings, and they're going to have two separate names because they can hardly call themselves the United Methodist Church anymore.
No, they could call themselves the Warring Methodist Church or the Divided Methodist Church, but they prefer to go through a conscious uncoupling.
But the conservatives are insisting homosexuality is incompatible with church teaching, and the others are saying we want to do gay weddings and we want gay clergy, and they'll just go their separate ways and they'll be happier. I wish we could effect such a divorce in our country without a civil war.
Do we have any idea of the numbers?
I don't.
Or what happens to church property? That was a big problem with the Episcopal Church.
Well, maybe that's this whole thing about neighborliness, and they'll maintain that, because it is a hierarchical church with bishops and all that.
Well, it would be nice if they did a rational split so that the progressive part of the church could maintain the property it occupies and the conservatives could maintain theirs.
In the United States, I'm expecting the majority are going to be in the liberal wing. This is a worldwide church, and it is the third world mostly, the zeal of the converted.
That kept them on the conservative path officially. Right. Yeah, all right. And just a religious sort of footnote, Utah, you remember the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart, who was rescued finally some years later after being kidnapped in 2002. Well, her father, Ed, has now come out as gay.
I don't think he really meant to. I think it kind of got out, and then
he's leaving the family and he's leaving the Mormon Church. This is a real split.
But gay Republican bar owner Mauro Garza of he owns a gay bar called Pegasus in San Antonio. He's not leaving. He's running for Congress against Joaquin Castro. He's a big Trump supporter. And on gay people, he says, I do not wish to force Americans to understand our culture and various subcultures or even to accept them. So now there's a new Protest the Peg campaign boycotting his club. And these people are criticizing Kennedy Davenport of RuPaul's Drag Race for performing at the club.
Yes, that was a bad idea. Well, P.S., this guy ran for Congress last time in a neighboring district and got all of 600 votes. So
we can laugh, but Donald Trump is president.
Well,
he's not going to win this district.
This guy has got a track record of failure, so I'm not worried so much about him.
And more on Trump. How about the United States denying flu vaccinations to migrant families at border detention camps?
Isn't that an interesting genocidal approach?
It's about hoping to thin the herd.
Yes.
This was a subplot in the BBC HBO series.
Years and Years.
Yes, where they put people in migrant camps to essentially kill them, let them get sick and die.
Well, they have lost a few children to flu in these camps, and this could now multiply.
Lest we forget, this is how Anne Frank died. She wasn't gassed. She died of typhoid in Bergen-Belsen. But better news in Wisconsin, speaking of health and transgender people, U.S. District Judge William Conley granted summary judgment to a class of Medicaid participants issuing a permanent injunction against denial of coverage for gender confirmation surgery under Medicaid. And he said it not only violates the ACA, which is being challenged in court by Trump, but also the Medicaid Act itself and the Equal Protection Clause. So it's going to stand if the ACA falls.
Let's go to the Lexington, Kentucky T-shirt case.
All right, here we are.
We've been talking about this case for years, and we've been talking about
since 2012.
Whoa. In the context of a lot of other cases, the cake cases, the flower cases, the whatever. But because this is a case where a print shop owner in Lexington, Kentucky did not want to print this T-shirt for the 5th annual Lexington Pride Festival.
Well, that's not entirely true, because they submitted this design and he said, fine. Oh, fine, here, I'll get it to you on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But then he figured out what Lexington Pride was all about.
Yep.
And now they're in court saying, this is about,
his religious objections.
No, it's about same-sex marriage.
Yes.
And it's about perversion and all these things, which. So that's why, see, if it was just a print case where you came in and said, I don't want to print this, I think printers are entitled to say, I don't want to print something. But this, he's against the group. He's not against the design.
Well, he's against the design in retrospect, and is there a time limit on when he gets to figure out his attitude on the design, I say, as playing devil's advocate. But the Pride Festival people say he's discriminating against us on the basis of sexual orientation, and he's saying, no, it's the message of the T-shirt.
So the appeal, they won at the level of the Human Rights Commission. The appeals court,
the Pride Festival won.
The appeals court found no proof of discrimination based on sexual orientation, but affirmed disapproval of the message, advocating sexual activity outside of marriage. But again, that all, as I said, came up later. That's what makes this case complicated, because normally
it is complicated.
I would, if this
because printers are a special case and are allowed to make decisions about what they will print.
Yeah, a printer, you bring in a pornographic book, they don't have to print it if they don't want to.
Whereas a baker who serves the public is expected to serve all of the public equally.
This guy is supposed to serve the public too, and even the appeals court said if they had been rejected on the basis of their sexual orientation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be optimistic about the case, but
No.
I think that it's muddy.
It is muddy. All right. And less muddy in Alabama, Springfield High School censored a yearbook picture of a female student, a lesbian female student.
Holly Gerelds.
Or Gerald's.
Gerald's, yeah.
One or the other. She was not comfortable in the usual, black drape, shoulder covering thing that they put on women for yearbook pictures. And she wanted to be in a tux. So the photographer said, fine, I'll shoot you in the tux. And this is the picture she wanted in the yearbook. But in fact, the school said, no, that is, they gender stereotyped. They said, this is not appropriate for our female student.
This is a public high school.
Yeah, and so the yearbook was published, and she picks up a copy of the yearbook, and she's in a list at the end that says no picture available.
But the school now says they're going to print a page to include all students regardless of choice of attire, that they're learning about these issues, because they could be sued.
Yeah. And in Denver, Colorado, at Coors Field, where the Colorado Rockies baseball team plays, a lesbian couple attending a ball game to celebrate their anniversary were asked by a stadium employee to refrain from kissing. Now, they say they were just doing casual, light kissing.
That's all you have to do to drive people crazy.
Well, the stadium has explicit rules that say no outrageous public displays of affection that would be outside of
slipping
family. They didn't go. Yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. So they
get a room.
They feel they were treated in a way that a straight couple would not have been treated. So they complained, and the Colorado Rockies have apologized to them and offered them tickets to a subsequent game. But they think this is basically a little lip service. I just made that up. Because the team owner is someone who asserts Christian values in a way that is a little obnoxious.
Well, I don't know what Houston mayoral candidate Demetria Smith is asserting, but she made a post on, I think it was social media. Houston have had too many gay mayors back to back in City Hall, period.
I think that would be 2.
It's time to get it straight. But she said,
so to speak.
She said she's not homophobic, and her words are being twisted. But on the other hand, out Mayor Jane Castor of Tampa has issued an executive order to recognize LGBT-owned businesses.
Yeah. Gay people are suing YouTube because they have been preventing ads from appearing on LGBT videos, according to this suit, and slapping a mature label on LGBT videos. And the people suing feel that they're being discriminated against.
And they're losing revenue because they can't sell as many ads.
Exactly. And there are also charges that Google is removing apps by Hornet and Scruff, which are gay dating apps. And it turns out, who's removing these? The Google vetters are people in Malaysia. They've hired people in Malaysia to vet the apps on Google. And now, you'd think that headquarters might overrule that decision, but so far, no. Malaysia controls.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, and I'm not trying to be, anything here other than there are some cultures that don't understand us as well. We were sent in when we worked at Hedrick Martin to go train people who were going to do AIDS work in New York, and a whole bunch of this was a whole room full of Nigerians who the Catholic Church had brought in, and they said to us, "This is very interesting to us because we don't have homosexuality where we're from." Speaking of New York, Bill de Blasio, who's got a failing presidential campaign, is now hitting up the ultra-Orthodox Jews for money from the campaign. And they mostly went for Trump in 2016, but de Blasio has done very well.
Because they're loyal to Trump and America and not...
De Blasio has done very well by them.
Yeah.
He funneled tons of money there.
Yeah.
Doesn't stand up to their,
Does any New York mayor?
Well, we got Corey Johnson to vote against that bill to give them free security officers.
He's not mayor yet. I'm talking about mayors.
But everybody else indulges them. I mean, they didn't even address the measles outbreak in that community for months and months and months and months and months.
Or herpes in,
circumcision, et cetera. Or even cracking down on the horrible education job they do with their kids.
All right. Well,
all right. Now I mentioned that in New York, there's these lawsuits against abusers. The window has opened up for a year. It started last week.
Right.
1,000 suits have been filed. For 1 year, you can file. And you can also...
If you've ever historically been sexually abused by whatever authority figure.
Or anybody.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. There used to be a statute of limitations, but that has been lifted for a year.
They used to stop you from filing when you were 23. Now it's up to 55, and then for now, it's forever. Anybody. But one of the suits is by a guy named James Grine, 61 years old. He was abused as a child by Ted McCarrick, the Archbishop of Newark, and then he was in New York and Washington since childhood. He was in a meeting with Pope John Paul in front of Vatican officials 31 years ago, all right, telling them about this, about McCarrick, who was now an archbishop.
Grine
was. He said, the Pope put his hands on my head and said, "I'll pray for you." Nothing was done, and so they are now going to seek to depose Vatican officials on this.
I thought you were going to tell me they were going to seek to depose John Paul II, and I was going to say they didn't have much chance of that.
Well, I think they might want to take his halo off and not make him a saint anymore.
Don't hold your breath.
I think it's certainly grounds for it.
Well, we have to take the halo off of Faye Dunaway.
Oh, my.
So she was scheduled to appear in this show, Tea at 5 on Broadway, which has something to do with Katharine Hepburn. Yep. She was going to play Katharine Hepburn, I guess, which doesn't strike me as good casting, but whatever. So she got fired. And one of the guys in the play, I guess...
No, he's her personal assistant during the play.
Really? Michael Roca.
Yep.
He made public the news that she had been fired for not being able to remember her lines.
And throwing things at people.
Slapping a crew member, throwing things, whatever. So then she starts abusing him. He gets fired. And now he has filed suit against her.
Well, she called him and other other workers there little gay people and called him a little homosexual boy. And so
I think little gay people is kind of cute. I can see going into a room and calling people little gay people.
You've never
but
called
I
me
am
that,
a gay
but
person,
then again,
so,
I'm rather large.
Yeah.
But when he complained to management about her, he was fired.
Yeah.
So he's suing the whole company.
So it's a mess. Let's see if Tea at 5 ever appears on Broadway.
And then there's news that, and again, I'm going to say, I don't believe the accuser in this case. Don Lemon is being sued by a Trump supporter who has a grudge against CNN, who says that is suing Don Lemon for sexual harassment. He said while he was bartending in the Hamptons, Lemon categorically denies it. The guy tried to extort Lemon for $1.5 million, and I won't file the suit. His name is Dustin Heiss, H-I-C-E. He ought to be countersued. Lemon is engaged to Tim Malone. That doesn't mean that he couldn't have done something
We
wrong.
weren't there. We don't know.
You read this thing.
What we do know is that at a Metropolitan Community Church in Albuquerque, New Mexico, windows have been broken in the church 6 times in 2 weeks.
And they put the rocks inside the church, and they said, we're stronger than a little rock. And that was what Pastor Judith Maynard said. Nice to see that they rounded up 4 white supremacists this week who were about to shoot us all.
Yes, I do appreciate law enforcement for doing that.
And as we mentioned last week, Gavin Grimm won his case against Gloucester School Board. They are appealing, and Gavin says, I'll see it all the way through. But they did say, we will change your transcript, Gavin, to say that you are male.
Wow.
In the meantime.
Right.
It goes to the Fourth Circuit.
Yes, the federal courts had sent it, yes, but the higher courts had sent it back, and now it's going up again, and so it may get to the Supreme Court again.
Gavin is a real hero.
He really, really is, because he has persisted.
Yes.
All right, international news.
Okay.
Congratulations to the mayor of Ottawa, Canada, Jim Watson, who has come out at the age of
58.
He says he struggled with this. He also said better late than never.
Well, he
That's
said
a cute little goat he's holding.
He said, my reluctance has not allowed me to live my life as full of love and adventure as my gay friends, who were braver and bolder than I ever was.
Well, except we got a note from a viewer who said that the mayor had shown up at some event with someone who appeared to be a boyfriend, and so I don't think he was entirely... I was feeling sorry for him for a while for leading a very lonely life, but I don't think it was entirely lonely.
But how do you...
But welcome to the club, Jim.
Are you ready to welcome Duterte of the Philippines?
No, this is a Trump move.
He met with LGBT advocates and he said, I'm all for you. I support your equal rights. I'm supporting your SOGI bill, your sexual orientation, gender identity bill. This guy is a thug.
And I support you having an LGBTQ convention to talk about your needs or whatever.
What's it all about?
Well,
Trump
he's bringing us out into the open so he can kill us like the drug users.
Trump hasn't met with gay advocates, has he?
Well, he's met with Peter Thiel. He's met with Rick Grinnell. He's met, I'm sure he's met log cabin types. I don't think anyone, look, I really think the question of the week is, it's very strange because people who have been in the White House, who've worked with him, who've met with him, say he is a total maniac who has lost his mind. And then he gets on TV, and while I don't think, he says nothing I agree with or think is the truth, he appears semi-cogent. And then you hear these stories of that he's really lost it. And I think his mental state is a real question at the moment.
Okay.
I've always thought he might resign before the end of his term.
So that Mike Pence could pardon him for all of his federal crimes.
Maybe.
But
it'd still be better than having him in office.
Tish James is after him, our attorney general, and those crimes can't be pardoned. And people are saying that she ought to dissolve the Trump Corporation, not just his charity, but the whole corporation.
Do we care about this Northern Ireland story of the man who's going to appeal the cake message ruling?
Let's see how it goes.
It's all getting very complicated.
Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's not really big news. The Palestinian Authority this year in the West Bank, they barred the LGBT group Al-Qaws, QAWS, from holding events. Now, the group vowed to hold the events anyway. It generally operates in Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem and in Haifa, but also in Ramallah on the West Bank and in Nablus. Yeah.
The Palestinian Authority said that the work of the group was harmful to the higher values and ideals of Palestinian society. The group says they do educational, professional programs on sexual and gender diversity. Now, this, of course, then immediately implicated the Palestinian members of Congress, the whole Israeli lobby, the BDS arguments.
Yeah, but here's the deal. When you tell me that a particular culture, is anti-gay, like Catholics and Jews and Orthodox Jews and evangelicals, I don't like that. But I also don't think your civil rights should be taken away because you hold these abhorrent positions.
The fact that the Palestinian Authority is saying this to Al-Cause doesn't mean that they're any less abused by the
Correct.
Israeli government.
Correct.
Is the real thing.
All right.
And in nearby Dubai, the singer for the group 1975, a current popular group, Matt Healy kissed a man in the crowd while singing the song Loving Someone, and this was a pretty bold move in Dubai.
The leader of Poland, of the Law and Justice Party, I guess they're worried about re-election, so they're being homophobic, Jaroslaw Kaczynski, he referred to pride marches as traveling theater, harming Polish society.
Well, the best ones are traveling theater.
Yes, like the one we did in New York this year.
Yeah.
The Reclaim Pride March, the Queer Liberation March.
But here's my favorite story of the week. I always have one. Wales.
Well, I don't know this, so I'm
maybe
glad I
you
watched
did.
this show.
In Porthcawl, I think it's pronounced Porthcawl, could be either. The local government has decided to make some physical adjustments to the public toilets where they are unhappy that men are meeting for sex.
Oh.
So they have put in a system to make the floors weight sensitive to people.
In the stalls?
Yes.
Not too many people get in the stalls together.
Look, I think it's insane. So when two people get in the stalls together and trigger the weight sensitivity, the doors spring open and water jets douse them. And this is supposed to discourage sex. And my question is, what makes them think this is going to discourage anybody? It sounds very appealing.
Oh, well, the playwright, Joe Orton was famous for going into the toilets. It was in the movie about him and everything, Prick Up Your Ears. But they named one after him after he died.
Yes. Well, the idea that you're going to stop this with nonsense like this, you don't want it to happen, station a cop in there. In uniform, not plainclothes cops there to seduce people into behavior they don't want.
The United Kingdom is a funny place. I mean, an immigration judge there rejected asylum seekers who claimed to be gay, saying this guy wasn't effeminate enough. Interestingly, the man's partner won asylum from another judge on the same evidence. Now, 33% of asylum appeals based on sexual orientation were successful in 2017.
That's not a lot.
Below the 40% average for all appeals.
Yeah.
They're tough over there in the UK.
They are.
They're anti-immigrant.
Well, as opposed to here.
Brexit.
As opposed to here.
We love immigrants in New York.
Well, and
we have 500,000 undocumented people in the New York area, and nobody cares.
The latest from Trump is he's going to get rid of the limits on how long you can hold refugees.
20 days for children.
Now you can hold them forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
This is fascism.
Congratulations to Guardian sports writer in the UK, Nikki Bandini, who has come out as a trans woman.
Yep.
Happily in a column in The Guardian.
Writing about football, where there are no football players in the top echelons of football in England.
And I wouldn't imagine there are a lot of female sports writers
no, that's also tough.
Either.
They're mostly straight men.
Yeah.
I should have picked up when you were talking about the toilet. there's the Virgin Active Gym, it's called, in London, Virgin Company. They're under fire. They told their members because of inappropriate behavior in locker room facilities, undercover cops were being deployed to investigate criminal behavior. Now, the London police said, we're doing no such thing. And so Virgin apologized.
What they do, put up signs saying, watch out, there are undercover cops here?
Yes. Virgin said it was a miscommunication. We were just trying to frighten you.
Here's what they should do. Put up a scarecrow with a police uniform on it. See if that does anything.
Yeah, well, no, but they'd have to be in a towel maybe with a badge.
And the guys that end up having sex with them.
Right.
In Berlin, to get more serious, there's a gay Holocaust memorial, and one of the features of the memorial is that you can look through a little window into one of the pillars or something, and see same-sex couples kissing.
Yeah.
And this is
seems to upset people.
Well, someone has painted over the window so you can no longer see this. So.
What is it that upsets you so much? I think you all should reflect on that.
Well, that's why the window is there, because people are upset and we're trying to desensitize them.
Kind of my favorite story of the week is the retirement, and not that I'm happy that he's retiring, but of out-gay South African Justice Edwin Cameron, who served 10 years on the High Court there. He was 25 years on the bench. He was called to the bench by no less, that's him on the right, and the picture. He was called to the bench by no less than Nelson Mandela. And the minister who spoke at the retirement ceremony said, there is no vulnerable group in South Africa that you didn't fight for.
Didn't we have him on this show?
We did. And he wrote a book.
What a great guy.
He was from I didn't know this, and we didn't talk about this on the show, he was from a multiracial family, including a sister who raised him after he'd been placed in an orphanage at the age of 5. In 1999, he came out about having had HIV since 1987. Wonderful guy.
Really terrific.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's going to retire into nothingness.
He's 66 years old.
He's expected to go on to do other things, but he's spent 25 years on the bench and the last 10 on the Constitutional Court, and he's ready for a new challenge, I think. But he left with his last decision being about land distribution, and he has really done miraculous things about this.
And he sort of said, I don't envy the people who have to make all the decisions going forward here. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, but what a great guy. And my last international story comes from the country of Georgia, where an American who moved to Georgia, a lawyer who is thus now described as American Georgian, has filed a complaint against a right-wing leader in Georgia for attacking and abusing LGBT people. We'll keep an eye on where that suit goes. Cuba
prevented an LGBT activist from traveling to the United States. He was headed in. Basically, it was the immigration officer not liking this, queer traveling.
Well, there are sort of two camps in Cuba. There are the official gays who hang out with Mariel Castro, and then there are the independent gays who are anathema to the government because they challenge the government.
And in Brazil, President Bolsonaro, the fascist, is trying to prevent the National Cinema Agency from funding LGBT-themed films. Well, that's probably going to be the least of it by the time he gets finished with us.
While letting a lot of the Amazon forest burn down.
Right.
A mess.
Okay,
All right. AIDS news.
Yeah.
There is a new executive director of UN AIDS, Winnie
Byanyima.
Yeah. She's a human rights activist from Uganda, and she was the executive director of Oxfam International.
She's a former member of parliament as well, and she's the first woman in this position.
So people are optimistic that she is someone with a strong human rights background and that perhaps she can help make progress on getting the medicines that are needed to the people who need them, because we're not doing a good enough job at that currently.
She's a big feminist leader. In New York State, I mentioned our Attorney General, Tish James. She's brought criminal charges against 3 pharmacies managers who made $40 million in Medicaid fraud.
Wow.
And here's what they did. They'd fill your HIV prescription, and you're poor, and they say, we'll give you $100 for it, $20 for it, whatever. And you'd take it, you say, oh yeah, you're gonna give me cash? And they take the drugs, and then they'd resell them at the thousands of dollars price. They made $40 million this way.
Wow.
The pills can cost $100 a piece, which is also a scandal.
Wow. The World Health Organization has come out with new guidance on PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis against HIV, taking medicine. Now, we know about taking Truvada on a daily basis to prevent infection with HIV, and that is virtually 100% effective. But we've also toyed around in the past with different variations on that, and the World Health Organization has now officially declared that event-driven PrEP can be effective. And that involves taking 2 pills, 2 Truvada pills or other preventive pills, 2 to 24 hours before sex, and then another pill 24 hours after you've taken the first 2, and another one 48 hours after you've taken the first 2. Now that's a great solution for people who are not that sexually active, because it means you don't have to take this drug all the time. It's expensive, you may have access issues, and you can just confine your use to 4 pills total around your sexual activity.
And in the United Kingdom, there are continued delays about rolling out PrEP. Thousands are now buying, in England, and the UK are buying it online. It is available in Scotland. In California, State Senator Ben Hoyso is asking the State Attorney General to investigate the AIDS Healthcare Foundation over an alleged fraudulent misuse of savings from a federal drug discount program to help poor patients. Under this program, the money that the agency saves by dispensing the drugs cheaply, they can keep. But AIDS Healthcare Foundation has spent $60 million on state ballot initiatives. They're not supposed to use it politically. And I didn't realize this group operates 50 pharmacies and has a $1.6 billion budget.
Oh yeah, they're big time.
Well, that's
very powerful.
All right.
All right, entertainment news?
Yeah.
Well, there is a very, very big story in the Bachelor, Bachelorette franchise area.
Okay.
Bachelor in Paradise. Now, I gave up watching these shows years ago. I watched a couple of seasons of things. But Bachelor in Paradise is the worst. If they take failing contestants from the Bachelor and Bachelorette shows.
I think I saw about 10 minutes of this when I was flipping through channels.
They put them in some tropical setting for a summer series, and they're all supposed to pair off and have sex with each other or whatever.
And there was one guy who said, I've slept with all the women on the set.
Entirely possible, and probably the production team too. Except last night, as we are taping on Wednesday afternoon. There is a contestant or a participant named Demi, or Demi. I haven't watched the show, so I don't know how her name is pronounced. So she's been developing a relationship with Derek on the show. But she has been telling Derek that, in fact, she is bisexual and left a girlfriend at home to come on the show. Well, this, of course, pricks up the ears of the production team. And what do? They bring the girlfriend on the show.
Oh, they love to do that.
Well, this is only the second time in the entire history of all these franchises that they brought an outsider onto one of these shows.
Really?
Yes. And Christian, the girlfriend, is now on the show. She and Demi are together, and Demi says to Christian, "It's always been you. It was you from the very beginning. It's never been anyone but you, and I want to be with you." So this is now setting off fireworks all over Bachelor land. tune in if you care.
This is how our culture makes progress on these issues.
Well, we always said that we wanted to be everywhere because that's how we would desensitize the public.
I'm not sure if, well, first of all, I do want to invite you to our old friend Donna Aceto. You see a lot of her pictures on this show. She's a great photographer. They're doing a retrospective of her work going back 25 years at the East One Coffee Roasters at 170 West 23rd Street there at 7th Avenue through August and then some in September, but the full show.
You can buy the pictures.
It's open every day. We don't sell pictures on this show, but yes. Anyway, so we love Donna. Go see the show. I'm going to go see it. I saw Seawall A Life with Jake Gyllenhaal and Tom Sturridge, two of my favorite actors on Broadway. They were doing monologues about fatherhood and birth and death. It's by two playwrights, Simon Stevens, who did Curious Incident of the Dog, Nick Payne, who did Constellations. But I would say their simple writing doesn't survive having very little stagecraft. This is just the two guys, one after the other, standing on the stage.
It's basically if you want to go stare at Jake Gyllenhaal and Tom Sturridge.
It's too writerly. It sounded like they were reading a short story to me more than they were telling me anything. But anyway.
Well, I have a much better recommendation for you, and that is this new TV show, David Makes Man, on the Oprah OWN network. And this is by our old friend, Terrell Alvin McCraney. Yeah. Who wrote the story that became Moonlight, the Oscar-winning movie. And this is a very similar story, except now it plays out in a whole extended television series. It's the same setting in the Miami housing project, basically, area. Young boy in school and fitting in and not fitting in with his community. He's not gay in this, but there is a whole lineup of queer characters in the show. And I watched the first episode last week, and it was so moving and so brilliant.
Where is it on again?
The OWN network on Wednesday nights. And you can catch up with the second episode airs tonight as we're taping, so by the time you hear this, 2 will have aired, but it'll be available on demand for those of you who have that. David Makes Man. It's brilliant. It is as brilliantly shot and written and moving as Moonlight was, except now you get hours and hours of it. And Oprah tells the story of having been invited in to hear the pitch, and it was supposed to be 10 minutes, and she came out after half an hour weeping.
That Oprah is something.
Well, the show is something.
All right. Paula Vogel's How I Learned to Drive is going to be revived on Broadway with Mary Louise Parker and David Morse.
I'm amazed they can do the roles 20 years later.
It's not going to be on until March, but she won the Pulitzer for this.
And the Pose finale was on last night. Terrific. They've now completed 2 seasons. You can also catch up with all of those on demand, and it's really worth it. It's a wonderful series.
Years ago, we told you Matthew Bourne, the choreographer who did Swan Lake, was going to do Romeo and Juliet, but it was based on the Prokofiev ballet. But he was going to do it with male leads. He said it's going to be tough, but he didn't. He did it. But it's in an insane asylum, and it's done with heterosexual couples.
Okay.
And open to very nice notices, is playing in London at Sadler's Wells until August 31st if you're over there.
And if you're in Hollywood, California on September 7th, there's going to be a sort of street performance called Love and or Fear, a celebration of genders. At 6500 Hollywood Boulevard, dance, performance art, mixed visual art, workshops, the whole thing on September 7th.
So we will be with you next week, and we'll have more insight into the president's mental state.
Oh, I hope so. I really want more insight into the president's mental state. It's just amazing the way he is just
melting down.
He is. He's disgorging himself of all these words and opinions on a daily basis. He just...
Think he might explode?
He might. It kind of looks like that.
Well, I just hope he doesn't explode the world. But thank you for being with us, and we hope to bring you better news next week.
We always hope that. We don't always accomplish it.
And it will be if we all stand up for ourselves.
Okay. See you next week. Bye.